consulted seers, was not a great king. David was anointed king while Saul was still king. That's pretty crazy. Imagine that. So there's still a king reigning. God's turned his back on Saul completely, and God has anointed through Samuel David as king. So now there's a king here and a king rising and trying to reign here, and it's causing this civil war, this people are following David and people are following Saul, and how's this going to play out? A lot of drama in this story as we go forward. And David had become a great warrior, and David had become super well known to a point where they were even singing songs about David. So one of the songs was Saul kills his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. And so this caused a lot of jealousy on Saul's part. Again, we've got these two kings trying to reign simultaneously. It's really a problem. And David is so humble and a man after God's own heart. He's trying to step back and allow Saul, out of respect for Saul and respect for God anointing Saul, he's trying to allow Saul to reign, and yet people are trying to elevate David. And it's this big problem, right? And to make matters worse, David and Saul's son are best friends. Just to add just a little bit more drama into it. You probably couldn't write a better late night soap opera or something with more intriguing and interesting characters than how this is all playing out. And then you've got little Mephibosheth or Mephibosheth as a 5-year-old in this whole story. And you figure, well, David and Jonathan are great friends. Mephibosheth probably looks at David as an uncle or just, that kind of figure. Probably always over for dinner. They probably play checkers on a regular basis. Uncle David's amazing, and my uncle's going to be king. Wait, my grandfather's king? I'm sure there's some interesting dynamics at play here. So bear with me. So Jonathan knew that David would be king after Saul, right? So he knows my dad's reign is over. Jonathan, in an interesting kind of twist, he's supposed to be king, right? If Saul's king, then the next king realistically should be Jonathan. And yet Jonathan already knows that David's going to be king. Jonathan knows that God has made a complete 180 and has gone David as king. But there's an interesting thing that would happen back in this culture and society, when the king would die or a new king would take place, the new king would go into the old king's family and wipe out the entire family line. So if you were king and someone succeeded you as king, you could expect your whole family to be wiped out, because the new king didn't want any new claim to that throne other than your family line. And it was pretty brutal. And so it was expected, even in God's kingdom, it was expected that once you became king, you start taking people out. So Jonathan, being David's best friend, went to David knowing David would be king. I said, hey, this can't happen. You and I are best friends. You need to protect my family. So they made an oath. They made a covenant together that David would look after Jonathan's family once David became king. Basically kind of separating Jonathan's family from that wrath of the future king, right? So they made that oath as good friends. David, of course, would want to live up to that oath. So just a little bit of a side, when I was growing up, I was always looking up to my brother. My brother is literally looking up to my brother. He's like 6'7", 6'8". Excuse me. All last week I was dealing with walking pneumonia, and I've the remnants of the cough, so I apologize every now and then. And it's nice to have a mic because you can just be like this and cough, and then I'm just coughing at you guys. But I was always looking up to my brother. We had a big high school in Southern California, like 4,200 students, and he was the valedictorian of our high school. He was super smart. He was a great athlete. My wife would argue that I'm better looking than him, but other than that, he had a lot of things above me. And even when I became a freshman in high school, he was a senior, and my teachers would call me Johnny. His name was John. They'd call me Johnny, and be like, "I'm David." And ironically, the two characters in the story, Jonathan and David, that's my brother and our name. My parents like, "Hey, let's have a civil war between our families." No, I don't think that was their thought process. But I was always looking up to my brother, and I always wanted to be like him. I always wanted to be smart like him, but I wasn't. I got by and I did okay, but I was never quite at his level. I always wanted to be as athletic as him. I always wanted to be as popular and as well known and of all those things. And so it became that I was comparing myself to his athleticism, his intelligence, his popularity, and I put my value in those things. So I didn't know God. I didn't know the first hint of God when I was in high school. So I put my value in those things instead of recognizing those things that God gave me and who God made me to be. In a sense, I valued worthless things And thus, I was worthless. The things I worshiped were worthless, and that makes me worthless. And in Jeremiah 2:5, there's a really neat verse that kind of describes how God sees these worthless things. Jeremiah 2:5, it says, "What fault did your fathers find in me that they strayed so far from me? They followed worthless idols and thus became worthless themselves." So as I was seeking these worthless idols, as I was seeking popularity and intelligence and grades and all these things, I recognize now that, well, those things fade away. Those things are worthless. So I became worthless. Our value isn't in what we achieve and what we do, right? It's in who we worship. It's literally in who we worship. God has placed his value in us. Thus we have value. My wife and I have debated on whether I should do this or not. We'll see. Does anybody have a phone? Anybody have a nice phone? Anybody have a nice phone? Nobody has a phone? Phone. Telephone. Telephone. Is it nice? You have several? Is it nice? Yes. Oh, okay. Not just value to you, but is it actually a really nice phone? Would I love your phone? Of course I would, right? So I have a question for you. I have $2,700 in this envelope right here. Can I buy it from you? Well, why not? I can have, I want her phone. Her phone's nicer. If you're willing to give me your phone, that's not worth anything. He's just willing to hand me his phone. That can't be worth much. Well, I'll be getting all sorts of weird phone calls in the middle of the night. So, if I offered you $2,700 right now, well, when I say $2,700, I mean 2,700 Anderbucks. I've got 2,700 Anderbucks right now. And well, give me the phone first. Look at 2,700 Anderbucks coming. Look at that.
Oh man, that's lovely. Thank you.
What do we have here? iPhone? Oh, nice. Mine's an Android.
Oh, that's okay. Mine is not anymore. Mine, whatever.
Well, I'm going to need the password soon, Mel. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Mel made a bad deal. So, okay. I'll figure out the password. I'll figure it out. I'll get it. Yeah. So, Mel made a terrible deal. What's that? Mel made a terrible deal. I got these Anderbucks. They are completely worthless. Sorry, I hate to break it to you. Yeah, adorable. Completely worthless, and the reason why they're worthless is pretty obvious. I'm the one backing up the Anderbucks, and if you went into my my bank account, you'd be like, whoa, these things are not worth the paper they're printed on. So I would apologize, but I think eBay will be kind to me with this guy here. So those Anderbucks are completely worthless because what backs them up is completely worthless. And as I was doing some research, I was pretty naive. I was like, well, what's our dollar based on? We're the gold standard, right? It's based on the gold standard. We are not based on gold standard. That's long time past. So it used to be that if we had $1 million in gold, we had $1 million in paper money or coin money representing that gold, right? Now we're on what's called fiat currency, that it's just basically the strength of our government, the strength of our trading abilities, all this. So people look at the United States government and go, wow, that's strong. Their trading is strong. Their economy is strong. Thus, the dollar is strong. So it has value because the United States government is backing that up. And so what we learned through the story of Mephibosheth, I'm going to call him 9 different names as we go. What we learned through the story of Mephibosheth is that the value that we have is not in that thing, but it's in the one who made us. It's in God. And Mephibosheth gets to explore that as we do too. So back to our story. We first hear about Mephibosheth in 2 Samuel 4 when the young boy is 5 years old. Remember, he's Jonathan's son. His grandfather and dad, Saul and Jonathan, they're out battling an enemy nation. And while the young boy's at home, probably just playing with his toys, hanging out in the courtyard, all of a sudden, a messenger runs in yelling that both Saul and Jonathan have been killed on the battlefield. His dad, his grandfather, killed on the battlefield. And everyone in their household begins to scatter. It's like turning the lights on in the middle of the night and watching the cockroaches run. They scatter. Saul's gone, Jonathan's gone. Here comes David and his men, about to wipe out the line of Saul, including Mephibosheth, everybody involved. It's about to be a new reign, a new day in Israel as they're about to be wiped out. But Mephibosheth's 5 years old. He's like, why are we afraid of David? My Uncle David's awesome. We play checkers all the time. We have dinner. Why are we afraid of David? So he's probably sitting there confused. And so as they're kind of processing and struggling through this, it's pandemonium. And think about Mephibosheth's kind of mindset, right? If he lived today and David is this huge, huge figure, right? He's killed his 10,000s. He'd probably have a Lego set of like David and Goliath playing with his Lego set, and he'd probably have a poster of David on his wall with a sword and a spear and Goliath's head. That'd be quite a poster, I guess, but a little dark maybe. They might have to blot out the poster of the poor little 5-year-old. But that's kind of how he probably looked at David. David was this huge rock star back in the day, and now he's taking over as king, and Mephibosheth is completely blown away. Why would David be coming after us? So as they started to scatter, they yelled at the young boy to run. The king and Jonathan are dead. David would kill the next in line, finish off the legacy of Saul. And next in line, of course, was Mephibosheth. So let's look at 2 Samuel 4:4. When the child's nurse heard the news, she picked him up and fled. But as she hurried away, she dropped him, and he became crippled. 5-year-old kid, crippled just like that. They picked him back up, didn't have time for a splint, didn't have time for a cast, didn't have time for any kind of medical attention. He's crippled. They run off, they go into exile, they go into hiding. So now he's crippled, his father and grandfather are dead. His whole life has been completely turned upside down. Very similar to Mel and how she's going to respond without her phone now. It's really a bummer. And they head off to a place called Lo Debar. So they head to this place called Lo Debar, and we'll talk about Lo Debar in a minute. It's an interesting place. So in 1 minute, life of this little 5-year-old is completely flipped upside down. And I'm sure we've all had those moments in our life, a Mephibosheth moment. I doubt we call him that. I'm like, boy, this is a Mephibosheth moment right now. I doubt we call him that, but that moment where maybe the doctor calls and gives us that bad news, or maybe that relationship that we had somehow went sour and we don't know what happened. Someone close to us has passed away. We're talking about my dad all the time, and I thought we had lost my dad about 1.5 years ago, and I keep waiting for that phone call. I'm in class, and I never answer my phone when I teach, and then my dad will call, or my mom will call in the middle of class, and I'm like, oh boy, So I answer the phone, and my dad's like, hey, how's it going? Good, Dad, everything all right? Oh yeah, just calling. And he's like, oh wait, it's middle of school, isn't it? I'm so sorry. I'm like, and I'm just thinking, okay, here we go, and so that Mephibosheth moment, I'm assuming it's going to come, that moment where everything just flips around. You think you're just cruising along, and then everything flips over. And that's what happened to this poor little guy. And so what's crazy is, we don't hear anything about him again for, I think, decades. They don't really give a time frame in this story, but decades pass. Mephibosheth is gone. He's exiled, he's split. David's been reigning, doing his thing, becoming a great king, going through his sinful moments that he does, but always turning around and blessing God. And Mephibosheth has no healing, no help, no nothing. He's just a crippled man in a society that does not value anybody who can't help society out, in a society that does not help if you can't help them, and that's where he is. But one day for Mephibosheth, everything changes. Everything changes. His life changed at 5 years old, and it's about to change again. So we'll continue with the story in 2 Samuel 9. 2 Samuel 9, we've jumped from 2 Samuel 4 to 2 Samuel 9, and David asks, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Out of the blue, David says, is anyone left in the house of Saul? Or the house of Jonathan that I can show kindness to? He's remembering that oath, that covenant he made with his best friend Jonathan. I'm sure David grieved for Saul. David loved Saul. Even though Saul's trying to kill him, David loved him. David loved Jonathan. I'm sure he grieved for Jonathan. Years later, decades later, is there anyone left in the house of Saul that I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake? Very unusual. The king should be, is there anyone left in the house of Jonathan that I can wipe out in case someone's trying to peck at my throne? So it'd be an odd statement to hear from this king. But David, a man after God's own heart, remembered the promise, the covenant he made to Jonathan. And as we look at this story, now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They called him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "Your servant," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness?" And Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is this son?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar." Interesting response that Ziba gives. He's the servant of Saul, gives this response. He said, "Yeah, Jonathan's son's still living, but here's the deal. He's crippled." In other words, what Ziba is really saying is, you're looking for someone that maybe can serve your kingdom or can help you, but I'm here to tell you he can't. He is of no value to you. And sometimes we see this in our society. I think it was very true back then as well. We might want to help people because they can help us. We might want to be kind to people because they can be kind to us. And so that's what Ziba's saying. He has nothing to offer you, king. He has nothing to offer. He's crippled. He's living in someone else's home. Excuse me. He has nothing to offer. Ziba is trying to say something without coming out right and saying it. And Jonathan, or David, has a completely different point of view. So another significant point is he's saying he's at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo-debar. Can't even support himself. Has zero ability to support himself. Completely crippled in both legs. Living under another man's roof. Completely useless to the king. Lo-debar, we can't really pass that up either. Lo-debar is an interesting place. I've never really heard of it except from the story. The word literally means no pasture or no word. This is the place that Mephibosheth decided that he would exile himself to, a place that there is nothing but darkness, no pasture. We lived in Southern California for a very long time, and if you go up over the beautiful mountains, you end up in the high desert, out, and you can keep going out towards, it's on the way to Vegas, but you can go to Death Valley and stuff, and it's like nobody would go out there for any reason at all, except maybe to hike and die. Death Valley is like 290 feet below sea level. It's hot, it's dry, there's zero plant life. No, nothing. So Lo-debar means no pasture. There's no life there. There's nothing there. And here is Mephibosheth, exiled, living in this place where and then I love this idea that there's no word. God is even barren from this place. God is it's not present in this place. Now we obviously know God is ever present, but I think the point is the people are exiled and they're just away from God. Away from God, away from society. Guys, I mentioned God, and it gets bright in here. I love it. So that's Lo-debar. So all of these things are happening, and all this symbolism is occurring, and David's recognizing, this kid is in need. So David sends men to pursue Mephibosheth and bring him back to the palace. Mephibosheth's no longer the young boy who idolized David as a hero. Ever since he was young and whisked away from his household and went into hiding, his perception of this new king probably changed. I'm sure he went from Uncle David, who probably held me on his lap and played games with and we had dinner with, to now the name of David probably sends complete fear through him and anyone around him. Pretty scary to think that if you're living your life today and there's somebody out there somewhere wants to kill you, and you're hiding in plain sight. Maybe you've separated off to a Lo-debar somewhere and you're hiding. Someone's out there trying to kill you. And all of a sudden, David sends his men out to Lo-debar to find Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth sees men coming. Oh boy, here we go. It's about that time. He's been waiting for it his whole life. So in this story, as we continue through this story, David sends his best men to Mephibosheth. He didn't know about the covenant, which is interesting. Probably had no idea about the covenant. Had no idea that David had made this covenant with Jonathan to protect his family line. So he's just in hiding. He's probably thinking, did David finally find out that I'm still alive? So let's jump to 2 Samuel 9, 5-8. Here's what it says. So King David has him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. Keep in mind, King David's not there yet. David's at the palace. His men brought him back. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, your servant," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" So David has Mephibosheth brought back from this place of exile to his palace. When he gets there, I'm sure Mephibosheth is thinking one thing, and David's going to turn the tables on him. David's going to honor that covenant that he made before God with Jonathan and love him. But instead of punishment, he's getting the kingdom. He's getting what his father, what his inheritance should have been. And what is Mephibosheth's response? What would your response be? Mephibosheth's response is, "Why would you do this for a dead dog like me?" Now, some of you have dogs at home. I go over to my parents' house, and they have dogs. My parents call their two dogs my brothers, and I'm pretty sure they think that the two dogs are more handsome than I am. I think that they would rather claim those two dogs as their sons more than me, especially by the way they treated them. I remember the way I was treated when I was a kid, and I watched them. Hi, Mom and Dad, if you're listening, this is for you. And I watch how they treat those dogs. I did not get treated the way those dogs get treated. If I wanted a snack, I was on my own. Those dogs, man, those dogs eat on a regular basis. Those dogs are treated pretty well. I'm sure if you guys have little dogs at home, they get treated pretty well. And we always had big dogs when I was growing up. My parents have these tiny little dogs that are just like jumping on laps and stuff. And it blows my mind how they get treated. I'm not against it. But if you look at how dogs were treated back in Israel, very different. They were street dogs. They were just not pets at all. They were considered the most vile creatures. And that's what Mephibosheth is comparing himself to here. He is just this vile creature. And this is how he sees himself. He sees himself as this lowest of the low, not even comparing himself to a human. He's just below human status because of his position. He's crippled. He's exiled. His family line is gone. And this is how he sees himself. But David's quote was, "Where is this son? Where is this son?" Mephibosheth was 5 when he was exiled. Nobody's called him son since he was 5 years old. I just really feel for this guy and just his situation, and how that has affected his psyche and his heart. I can only imagine just how he views himself. So have you ever found yourself, and I know I have, found yourself in that place where you just feel worthless? It was funny, I was talking to a friend of mine who is at school, and he made a couple of mistakes at work this week, and he was just like, "Holy smokes, I just felt worthless at work. I just felt like everything I touched just turned sour, and it was just one of those weeks where I just couldn't do anything right." And it's amazing how those things affect our psyche and our emotional state and how we see ourselves. You look in the mirror and you're just like, "I don't know what's going on with you." And then other times we're feeling pretty good. And so we kind of ride this emotional roller coaster of, I just don't like me. How can anyone else like me? How can anyone else see value in me? And this is where Mephibosheth had to be. He just sees no value in himself. He doesn't see any redeeming quality whatsoever. So why in the world would the king, David, come and seek him out? That just makes 0 sense to Mephibosheth. 0 sense. So as we move forward, quite possibly. So he goes, moving forward to 2 Samuel 9 through 13. Actually, I'm jumping ahead. So in the same way that David had an unlikely and different outcome but for Mephibosheth, God's desire for us is he doesn't want to punish us. It's really interesting. I think as I go through this, we can really see ourselves in Mephibosheth, right? So if David is kind of playing this God character and Mephibosheth is us, how often do we think, "Oh, I can't believe I did that thing again. I can't believe I," like what Paul says, I don't do what I ought to do, and I do what I know I ought not to do, and I keep sinning, and I just like look in the mirror and I just see that sinful person. And that's how we feel with God, I know, on a regular basis. And when I say we, I'm pretty much looking in a mirror and saying, that wasn't my intention. We look in that mirror and we just say, God, how can you love me? How can you love this person that I'm looking at when I keep doing this or thinking this or responding this way to situations? How can you keep loving me? And kind of back to those Anderbucks, that's not where our value is. Our value is not in those things that we've done. Our value is in the God who has forgiven us through our son, Jesus Christ. That's where our value is. That's what we don't see when we look in the mirror. And that's what God sees when he looks at us. He doesn't see that past sin or that future sin. He sees Jesus when he looks at us. That's truly amazing. And so when David's looking at Mephibosheth, he's not seeing crippled, exiled. He's seeing, the son of my best friend Jonathan, the person I made an oath with to take care of his family. Oh, here he comes. Here comes Mephibosheth. John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So God sent his only son to die on a cross to take our sin upon him, and for that sin to die with him on that cross. And that's how much God loves us. And this is where our story takes an interesting turn. And now we're in 2 Samuel 9 through 13. Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I've given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring him the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. So not only is he giving him everything that was Saul's, he's commanding Ziba and his family, all those servants, to farm the land, provide for Mephibosheth, and David said, you're going to eat at my table. And that's a huge deal. When the king says you're eating at my table, that's honored guests, honored family members. If you were invited to eat the king's table, that meant you were someone special. You were a dignitary from a foreign country. You were someone high up in military. You were somebody pretty amazing eating at the king's table. What's interesting is David's saying, not just saying, you'll eat at my table tonight. He's saying you'll always eat at my table. You are someone special. You are that person that I am designating that is someone who should always be at my table. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. This is not part of the of the message. I just left my water down here. Wives, you know this. She said, do you have your water? I said, I do. I didn't bring it with me. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever the Lord commands your servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem. I really apologize, I'm so sorry. Because he was always at the king's table, and he was crippled in both feet. It's a powerful story. A powerful story of love and grace. And it's our story. It's pretty amazing. It's our story. This is not how I planned this going. So, in the same way, we've pretty much done the same thing with God. I'm okay. Yeah, just gonna throw me a cough drop. I don't think that'll work. I think it will work. Thanks, honey. Thank you. You're not honey. She's honey. Let's just be clear, right? So in the same way, we've done the same thing with God, right? We've looked at God the same way he was looking at David. We've looked at God as the enemy. God is this person who wants to pour his wrath out on us. He wants to, I've sinned against God. God doesn't love me. I've sinned against God. God's turning his back on me. God's placed me in my own low bar. That's what we do to God. God's like, no, that's completely wrong. And this story is really amazing in the sense that David should have completely turned his back on Mephibosheth. And yet David, the opposite is true. Inviting Mephibosheth into his table. Please, eat at my table. Be this person of honor that you are in my kingdom. Many of us push ourselves out into our own exile, a spiritually desolate place where we begin to believe and internalize these things that we think about God. And I know that when I'm by myself thinking about God, that's the worst place to be. I start to think things about God that aren't true. You guys ever do that? Start to place those things on God that aren't true. Place them in this box that's just simply not true. And I do that more when I'm by myself. When I'm with other people, talking about it, praying about it, God certainly shows himself to be who he truly is. But when I'm by myself, I tend to place God in some boxes that he does not want me to put them in, which is exactly what Mephibosheth did with David. Maybe you're just waiting for God to punish you. Maybe you're carrying guilt for years of failures. Maybe you think that God's upset with you. And I promise you, you were just wrong. But not only that, So David brings him in and gives him everything that belonged to his grandfather Saul and his father Jonathan. So David's got all this stuff coming for him, much more than he ever thought. And what makes this story so relatable is that while we're Mephibosheth in the story, and the story's true, the story happened, God, they recorded it in the Bible, and that we are Mephibosheth. It's exactly what Christ has done for us on the cross. We too have fallen. We've been separated from our King, and we've been in darkness. That's kind of scary, right? For us, it's our sin that caused us to fall, and our sin that separated us from God. No one here is immune. Romans 3 says it's very clear that no one is righteous on our own among us, not even one. And we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We have fallen, and when we sinned, we fell away from God in that relationship with him. And like Mephibosheth, I'm so thankful that story doesn't end there, that we've just fallen short. I'm so thankful that David went to go get Mephibosheth, and Jesus went to go get us. Jesus died on that cross for our sins, completely restored us because of that. So I'm going to wrap up here. I'm just so thankful that that this story has been recorded for us. I'm so thankful that God saw fit to say, what a great thing that David has done to kind of represent how God has treated us through his son, Jesus Christ. It's just mind-blowing that God would send his son to die on the cross for our sins, even in that state of complete darkness and exile that we were in. So I just ask you guys to pray with me. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I apologize.